basically saying who you are, what makes you unique, what accomplishments do you bring to the table, and then ending with what is your North Star, your why.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It is not cool. My kids are 100% right. I'm not a cool mom. I'm a super learning on the fly, figuring it out as I go kind of woman. But anyway, I'm so glad to be here with you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. And today I have somebody who just oozes with evolution and empowerment. And I am so excited to introduce you guys to her today. If you haven't met Courtney Turich yet, she is here with me today. And today we're going to get into all sorts of things, including the way that you can learn to empower yourself, what it really takes today to succeed in sales, and a whole lot of evolution that this woman has been through to bring her to where she is now. So hello, welcome. I am Claire Davis. I am the owner of Traction Resume, where I help medical sales leaders, just like many of you listening, get great jobs that they love and that fulfill them in medical sales and make more money. So thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to subscribe and share this with your friends. And without further ado, hey, Courtney, how is it going over there?
Hey, Claire, so happy to be here and excited to talk to you and everyone else about just the evolution of life in our professional world, especially as a woman.
If you look out there into, on the internet, onto podcasts, onto live shows, there are a lot of wonderful male leaders in this space. But man, if there could be more women in this space, we are dedicated to getting it there. So tell us from the beginning, how did you even get into medical sales? Is it something that you thought, way back when you were planning out your career? Is it something you thought you'd stumble into, or was it a surprise?
What a good question, Claire. So it goes back, I really didn't even know medical sales reps existed until I met my stepfather, who is an orthopedic surgeon. And that's when this whole new world was introduced to me. He took me under his wing and showed me what his reps did for him, that there was this world of, wow, like you could basically create your own professional entrepreneurial world in this aspect of sales and medical sales. So it wasn't until my senior year of college that really became at the forefront. However, what I did realize after college, it's extremely hard to get in. I interviewed with several companies, and unfortunately, like many of us here, you need some experience or you need some B2B. And that's when I took it upon myself and actually got a job at AT&T Business, designing and selling data networks for a year. It was not anything I found exciting, but I did it, so I can call myself a tech guru, but a little bit far from it. Yeah. And then I got a call from a headhunter one day, a year after working for AT&T Business. Mm-hmm. And that's when the door opened for me, and I got a job at Stryker Navigation.
Okay. And Stryker Navigation at the time, it was a relatively new technology, wasn't it?
Extremely new. I was the fifth person hired. So it's almost like I worked with a startup, but had the backing of this huge company, which was great. So we got to fumble, mess up. I was wearing multiple hats. I started out as what they called a sales engineer, but essentially what that meant was I ran all over half the US, covering cases, acting as the expert for various Stryker reps, and, just kind of learning on the fly.
Yeah. Sometimes I think that's half the job, is how well do you learn in the trenches?
Oh my gosh. To think back at some of those moments, Claire, it's crazy.
Yeah. So, when I started early in my career, I remember I had some specific mentors that, they weren't some people that I intentionally sought out, but they ended up taking me under their wing. So was there anybody like that in your career who kind of showed you the ropes?
Absolutely. I've been very fortunate where I've had a few. When I first got in the industry, my manager was that person, and he was tough on me. He challenged me, but he also encouraged me at the same time. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 years after hiring me to leukemia, but I will tell you, he's always made an impact in my professional life. I think of him often. And then moving forward today, Ryan Denny is my current mentor. I've worked for him for the past 15 years, and he challenges me. He knows when to call my bluff. He also elevates me. And that's what I want in a mentor. I want somebody who's going to make me the best I can be. So yes, I've been very fortunate for that.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so you and Ryan are working together now?
I am. I've been consulting with him for the past year with various startups. It's really cool to see these CEOs who are also trying to bring their product to life, right? And just trying to find some direction.
How did you end up making your transition back into more and more startup ventures? What was the journey like for you?
So luckily at Stryker, being part of that startup environment there allowed me to wear many hats. They moved me around in various positions. So I was a sales engineer. I was a business development manager. I moved in-house to Kalamazoo and ran the orthopedic product navigation line. And that really gave me just a perspective of, wow, everything I could potentially do in that startup realm. Right? Because the day changes. You never know what to expect. And shortly after that is when I ended up creating my own product that I created with an old Stryker partner. And we just, it was like one day we just wanted to be able to bring something to life.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about what this is? I've heard you speak about this before, but for anybody who hasn't, this is a really great story. So can you tell us a little bit about the monkey mat?
Sure. So monkey mat's a 5 by 5 foot water repellent mat with weighted corners that can stuff back into a small pouch really quickly. So great for if you're traveling at the beach, you're on a bike ride, you're on a picnic at the airport. So one day we just decided, hey, I wonder what it's like to go on Shark Tank. So we got online, submitted our information. And funny enough, you submit a headshot and a brief overview of your product, and then it goes to the cyber world and you don't get an email back. You just think, let's see if anything happens. Yeah. And about a month later, we got a call from a producer, and that's when the process started. So there's a lot of work that goes into actually getting accepted to go to LA to film. But once you get to LA, even if you get to LA, it's not guaranteed that you're going to get a spot on TV.
Are you thinking, okay, I've made it. I've made this big transition. I'm working for a company. Now I'm going to make my own company. Now I'm going to bring my own product to life. This is it for me. I'm going to go the entrepreneurial track.
Of course, as an entrepreneur, right? You're living the dream. You're seeing the vision. You think this is going to be your end all be all. And as we learned a lot of lessons, and as it was exciting along the way, unfortunately, it wasn't it didn't make the financial impact that my family needed to survive. And I was at this crossroad where it was, okay, Courtney, are you really going to keep trying to make something work that in reality is not going to get there unless how do I say this? Unless you're really just 2 feet in, you're all in. And at that point, I wasn't all in. I felt like I was missing something. And I had transitioned to a different division of Stryker. And that division of Stryker got shut down. So luckily I got a severance, and I took that and really immersed myself into Monkey Mat for 3 years.
When I first started Traction Resume, actually, it was quite by accident. Having grown up in a household of recruiters, I was always the friend that my friends and colleagues had who could help them with their resume and interview prep. Little did I know 7 years later, we'd be talking about helping medical salespeople brand themselves through social media to operate well in the hybrid environment. It's a huge evolution. So do you feel like at some point, you're looking at your experience with Monkey Mat and thinking, this isn't serving me anymore? And what did that look like? Because so much of yourself goes into that it's got to be a hard transition.
It was more difficult than I would have ever imagined. And there's a saying people say, sometimes you have to lose yourself before you can be found. And at that point, it was a really dark moment for me because I did have a void and I knew that a change needed to happen. And it was one day I was talking to a friend that also went through the Shark Tank experience. And on that call, she shut her business down. And on that call, I remember saying, I'm done. It was such a pivotal moment for me to say that out loud that I was scared to say it out loud. But when I said it out loud, Claire, my whole world opened up again.
Was it freeing to say it out loud? Was it like, okay, I can finally admit it and move on?
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, I knew in my mind.
Sure.
I knew. But when I said it, it was like this huge weight off my shoulders. And, as I look back, I was at a point where I was no longer using the strengths on which I thrive upon. And that's what's made me so passionate about understanding what your strengths are, because if you do, your world becomes unstoppable.
One of the things that I hear you talk a lot about is becoming unstoppable. And so has that been the next step forward of your journey after Monkey Mat? Were you like on fire with what that is for you and what it can be for other people?
I wouldn't say instantly I was on fire. It was a little scary to come back to the medical space and to re-enter that world. It had been 3 years. It was a process to get my legs again within the industry. I will say it took me about a year to really be like, okay, I'm ready to rock and roll. And I have found my voice. I have found what I'm made of, my strengths. And really, it was a great feeling.
Okay. So how did you find your strengths? What was the process like for you?
So, this goes way back to my striker years. They are big gallop people. And one of my mentors there, he had me go through the Strength Finder, which outlines your 34 traits. However, you're only supposed to look at your top 5 strengths and just ignore the rest. And if you can really focus on those top 5, immerse yourself in them, your world opens. However, it's also important to know those strengths have pitfalls. So the more you become aware of your strengths, you also acknowledge not only what they can do for you, but how they hold you back too.
Do you think you've gained more wisdom by finding out the strength, or by finding, where your strengths don't lie and then how to support yourself despite?
That's a very interesting question. And, thinking about it, it's realizing where the weaknesses are with those strengths. And for example, my top strength is being an activator. I take action. When somebody tells me to do something, Claire, it is game on, time to go. Okay.
Yes.
So, it wasn't until I had an associate working for me, and he is the opposite. He needs to take a step back and really look at the situation. And that was a moment for me when I realized, wow, what a powerful team we make, because he knew when I thought it was time to take action, he would slow my roll and make sure that I was looking at every aspect that could possibly be a pitfall in its own way because of my putting blinders on, let's take action mentality.
If I had to think back to my Gallup poll, the most recent one, I think it was input, learner, achiever. I mean, here we are, medical salespeople, right?
Know,
like
right?
I'm sure 99% of us, everyone's like, yes, check. Because I thought, okay, well now I understand these strengths, but what I didn't realized was how to really leverage the other half of that coin. And it was not really until I understood how my personality and my brain worked until I really got what fulfilled me in the field. Because, as many people join medical sales, they are lured often by the promise of making a great wage. And you do, you can make a wonderful income in medical sales, but that's not what fulfills the folks that stay. Not usually, not in my experience. So being able to understand what that fulfillment is derived from was really powerful for me. And for me, it was acceptance into a new community, because I'm big on community and growing together. But it was also the many achievements along the way. For me, I wake up every morning, I get my notebook out and a pen, and I put my to-do list down on paper. And until those boxes are checked, I'm not satisfied for the day. And it doesn't have to be perfect, everything with a little grace, you guys. But for me, that worked. For others, it wouldn't work. It's different for everybody. So can you give us a little bit of a story about, or maybe a time when you've been able to leverage your strengths because, you understood them for what they are, and we're able to, optimize them for yourself?
Sure. I mean, gosh, Claire, I feel like I could give you a lot, because now that I really focus on them and live them daily, I see them every single day. But for, strategic, I was in capital sales. Let me give you a story of, it was COVID year, right? Everybody was struggling because we didn't know how to sell to our customers anymore. We couldn't get into the hospitals. We couldn't get into offices. However, I was a month away from needing to hit my quota. I had one system, I needed 7. And it's a capital sales process. And of course, it was an end of fiscal year, which would be December for a lot of companies and hospitals. It was the end of August. It was a very bizarre time frame to have an end of year. And we started, positivity is one of my traits. Here's my strengths. I should lay them
let's
out.
hear them.
I'm an activator.
Okay.
I'm strategic, positive, competitive, and a maximizer. Okay. So I knew we had 30 days left. I also find that the mind is a powerful, powerful tool. And yes, being positive is great, but you have to be a realist. Positivity can also outwin many times when you're struggling. So every day of that month of August, I sent my associate an email. I said where we are with our quota, and it ended with, we will hit quota. Every day for the entire month of August. And Claire, I am not kidding you, at 5 p.m., the last day of that month, we brought in our 7th unit.
Ooh, I love it. Right at the buzzer.
Yes. And for me, that was a moment of the power of the mind. We did the work. We did the strategic work, right? So it's not like we pulled this out of thin air. Okay. So I don't want anybody to think that. Like we had the pipeline built. We had room for error, right? It was padded. It was loaded.
Yeah.
But we stayed the course. We stayed focused, and we took action on what we needed to have happen, and we stayed positive, and we made it happen on the last hour.
You manifested that, but you took the actions, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the combination of the mind and making sure that you're using your strengths to push it forward.
Okay. So did you help him to also identify his strengths while you're, working through your process together? Is this kind of like a cornerstone of how you work with people?
It is. So anybody I work with, I have to know their strengths. It is just part of if you're part of my team, I need to know what makes you tick, because it also helps me to understand how to manage you and how to best serve you. I'm an activator. I take action. I put the blinders on. He's one who has to assess. So knowing that about him really helped me along the way, because he would ask questions when I'd set a plan in place. And initially I thought, wow, is he questioning my plan?
Sure.
And then when I knew his strengths, it all made sense. because he needs to understand the process. And once I looked at it from that angle, it never entered my mind again that he was questioning me.
Oh, wow. That's so powerful. I mean, Courtney, how often do we take these assessments, like a DISC or Enneagram or now
All the time.
Gallup, but we get our results, we read through our results, and then we put them in a filing cabinet and we never look at them again. So how often do you think people should be going back? Well, first, should people be going through the results? Yes. How often should they be going back and either reassessing or maybe even retaking these things?
So the Gallup says that you shouldn't retake it. Like your strengths are your strengths.
Okay.
Which is interesting. I took it when I was 24. And then I took it again probably 2 years ago when I was 42. And only 2 of my top 5 strengths changed.
Interesting. Okay. Got it.
So to me, that's fascinating, right? They didn't change much. And those other 2 strengths that were at the top, they're still in my top 10. They just kind of, everything shifted a little. Like strategic at 24 was not in my top 5.
Yeah.
But now I believe through experience, it's now at the top.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And I mean, what happens in, 20 years? Well, first of all, for you and I, right? Motherhood, career changes, world changes, relationship changes, all of that stuff is going to form us in some way. So
absolutely. When I realized what they did for me, that's when I wanted to stand on the mountaintop and let everybody know, hey, you've got to know this about yourself. Right. And I'd like to answer, you mentioned a question of what do I do with these? Like, do I just file them away? Because I think this is important because most of us file them away because we've taken so many, right?
Right.
And the Gallup, because they hone in and make it so simplified and give you those 5 words that you can really keep at the forefront, I tell everybody that I coach or I mentor to have a Google Drive. And in that Google Drive includes their top 5 strengths. And then we also work through what I call a bio of life. And that is the succinct way of basically saying who you are, what makes you unique, what accomplishments do you bring to the table, and then ending with what is your North Star, your why. So anytime you have an interview, I get on this podcast with you, for example, or I have an important meeting, I review mine very frequently because it's your own self pep talk. It gets you fired up for yourself.
Do you feel like this is an area where people haven't explored simply because they've been busy or it hasn't come up in their life? Or do you think there's a barrier?
I believe there's a barrier because it's not, you have to let your mind go there. You have to let your mind go there. And a lot of us are just running on the hamster wheel, right? Like it's a busy, fast-paced industry, whether it's work, life, whatever it might be. You actually need to take a step back and take a breath and reflect on yourself. But it's like going to the gym. Once you go once and you start to really allow yourself to go there, it gets easier and easier and easier. If we're in the medical world, understand how the brain works because there are neural pathways that you can train to allow yourself to have that reflection on a daily basis. A lot is investing the time, right? And you think, well, what am I going to get out of this, right? I already know myself. I'm doing a great job today. And do I really need to understand myself more? But what they don't realize is if they know themselves, they're now going to be selling off their strengths. And it will make sense when they're pushed in a direction by their manager that they don't like. Well, maybe if they knew their strengths, they could pivot it and make it work for them.
Okay.
I mean, Claire, I can't tell you how many people cannot explain what makes them unique. Okay. So, and that is one of the exercises we do. I mean, it's as simple as, hey, take a moment, put your strengths aside. You don't know your strengths at this time, but I want you to take 5 minutes and I want you to write down every word that describes you at the core. That can be hard for some people. But when they do it and they take a step back and they look at it, people get emotional because they've allowed to say, that I'm a leader, I'm passionate, I'm creative. And a lot of us don't say that about ourselves enough. And then I get a lot of people, when they say they're not unique, because that person paid for their school, but that's part of your journey, and it is unique. Mm-hmm. And you worked hard to put yourself through school, right? Yeah. Like, explain what that meant for you. What did it do to you to put yourself through school?
Right. Right.
On top of, what are your accomplishments? What are your top 3 accomplishments? I mean, it's really, in my mind, it shouldn't be as hard, but it is for a lot of people, because they just haven't taken the time.
It's funny you say that. I was working with a gentleman not too long ago. And when we spoke on the phone, he said, well, I mean, I've led a great career, but nothing of note. Really, Claire, like, there's nothing I could call to mind right now. And so, as a resume writer, my job is to find those things that you don't think are a big deal that are a great big deal.
Right.
And I remember this one day we were talking about how his company had really started bringing in exceptional talent right out of college through these programs that would kind of, reach out to top students, and they bring them in as interns. If they loved it and it was a fit, they'd be off to the races, right? Well, so I'm talking to him a little bit about the generation of this program. And he says, well, yeah, it just started. It didn't exist a couple of years ago. I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, well, how did it begin? Well, I reached out to a couple of local universities, and I just, talked to the right people, and bada bing, bada boom, we've got a program. I said, I'm sorry, you created the program of fostering talent at your own company? Oh, guy. Okay. But right. So many overlook the things that may even seem mundane or typical, or just something they don't even recognize as great because they're used to doing things like that, but to the rest of us are remarkable.
It is. It's enlightening for me. And it really, when I see people find their why or find their strengths, I equally get excited. And that is like the aha moment and the best feeling ever as a professional.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about what is next for you, because you have been an entrepreneur. You have been working at some of the biggest names in the industry. You've got an incredible track record helping, companies large and small, and people thrive within them. So what do you think you're going to do next? What's next for you?
Oh, I love this question. This past year has been really transformational for myself, and just discovering really even more about what makes me thrive. And, initially I started this journey of, I'm going to be a coach, because I do like to have people help them understand what their strengths are and what they bring to the table. But I still felt like there was a missing void. And when it made me realize I am meant to be part of a team. I am meant to be part of a startup, and the craziness and the passion of it all. And I'm excited to share that it will be soon, but I will be joining a team and being part of that craziness life again. And I am super excited to work with like-minded professionals and all strive for a common goal.
Awesome. Oh, I am so glad to hear that. That's so exciting.
Yes.
It's been really amazing following your journey. You and I met on LinkedIn, gosh, almost a year or 2 years ago. And to follow your journey since then has been really inspiring. I think that what really is needed in medical sales are more voices, more people who are willing to invest in the individual to help them find that authenticity, to help them find the fulfillment in their career. Yes. Because if there's one thing we have all learned over the last few years, is that money is not the be all end all. And so I think being this new generation of folks who are coming through the industry are so keenly aware that they've got to know themselves, right? They've got to get to know themselves so much more than they may have before. And that today medical sales looks different than it did 10 years ago.
It absolutely did. And I will tell you, Claire, I feel like it's the most competitive I've ever seen it. because the gain is higher than I've ever seen it. Last
question. I want to know what you think from your perspective, because we know medical sales has changed. The landscape has changed. The attention to an individual's mindset is here. Like, so many things have evolved just in the last couple of years. So for today's medical sales leader, what does it really take? Where should they invest today in themselves so that they can not only succeed, but really thrive in what they're doing and love themselves in the process?
Okay, so a few things. Number one, find your strengths. If I haven't made that point today, find your strengths. Understand what makes you unique. Find your tribe. You know, you've got to find people that lift you up and vice versa. These are your people. Lean on them, whether they're in your company or even on social media. I've met some of the most amazing people, you, Claire, being one of them, on LinkedIn. And it's hard to believe that these people I've never met in person are people I support on a daily basis. And I connect with them on a deep level just by hearing their voice. Share your voice is another thing. You don't think people are watching or listening or seeing. They are. And remember, your voice, your story might be what gets somebody else through that day and helps lift them up. And you put that energy out into the universe, it will come back. And you have to be doing a little bit of everything in this sales landscape right now. You can't just be sending emails. You can't send a text. You can't just be going into facilities. So get creative. Use your voice. Show your face. Show your wisdom and your value.
Oh, I love it. I have chills all over.
Yay.
Courtney, you're so inspirational to me, and I know so many. Where can people find you to learn more and to connect with you?
Well, please connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me a message. I'm always happy to provide guidance, talk through if you need something, or just find me there. I am an open book. And if I can share my wisdom to you and help you thrive, I absolutely will.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It is always a pleasure to speak to you. Like I told you backstage, honestly, you are the type who has lived 10 lives in one. And it's so fascinating to hear about your journey. And I absolutely adore what you are doing for other people, specifically men and women in medical sales. So thank you for everything you do. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks so much, Claire.